First contact and arrival. The crystalline spires of Acaleodynia rose like frozen lightning against the lavender sky of Nexus Prime. Thousands of translucent beings moved with synchronized precision through corridors that shifted and recalibrated with each passing moment. Here, knowledge was more than a pursuit. It was the very essence of existence. Headmaster Vornka's translucent tendrils rippled with agitation as he reviewed the unprecedented document before him. An exchange student from Earth, a human, was to arrive within the next solar cycle. The very notion seemed absurd. Humans were considered primitive by most galactic standards, barely emerging from their technological infancy, yet the Interstellar Academic Consortium had insisted on this cultural exchange. Impossible, Vornke muttered, his thought resonators flickering with barely contained frustration. The Acaleodynia had existed for millennia, a pinnacle of intellectual achievement where knowledge was cultivated with mathematical precision. What could a human possibly contribute to their meticulously structured world? The arrival day arrived with an unexpected shimmer of anticipation. The transportation gate, a marvel of quantum entanglement and gravitational manipulation, hummed to life. Most of the academic council watched with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Protocols demanded they receive the human student with formal decorum, regardless of their personal misgivings. A figure materialized. Not tall, not imposing, but somehow different. Maya Rodriguez stood barely 5 feet 6 inches, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing the standard-issue academic transfer uniform. But there was something in her eyes, a spark that seemed out of place in the carefully controlled environment of Acaleodynia. "Greetings," she said, her voice clear and direct. "I'm Maya Rodriguez, Earth Collaborative Institute of Advanced Studies." The assembled academics shifted uncomfortably. Their communication was typically conducted through precise thought transmissions and neural resonance. This verbal communication felt almost primitive. Vornke stepped forward, his form shimmering between solid and translucent. "Welcome to Acaleodynia," he responded, his words translated through advanced linguistic matrices. "Your presence here represents an unprecedented experiment in cross-species academic collaboration." Maya's smile was something entirely unexpected. It wasn't a programmed response or a calculated gesture. It was genuine, almost rebellious in its spontaneity. The initial placement tests revealed something the Acaleodynia administrators had not anticipated. While Maya's raw knowledge didn't immediately impress, her understanding of quantum mechanics and xenobiological systems was elementary by their standards. Her approach was something entirely different. During her first simulation analysis, she didn't just solve the complex problem. She reimagined it entirely. The task was a standard advanced theoretical challenge. Most species approached it through linear computational models, breaking down the problem into ever smaller mathematical constructs. Maya's solution wasn't a deconstruction. It was a radical reconstruction. "Why are we assuming these variables are fixed?" she had asked during her presentation, her finger tracing alternative pathways on the holographic display. The assembled academics watched in stunned silence as she demonstrated an approach that was less about solving the problem and more about understanding its fundamental nature. Professor Lyran X, head of theoretical systems, found her traditional neural pathways struggling to process what she was witnessing. Humans were supposed to be limited, constrained by their biological and technological restrictions. Yet here was this young human, challenging fundamental assumptions with an ease that was both infuriating and intriguing. The first day ended with more questions than answers. The Acaleodynia had seen countless species pass through its halls, each bringing their unique perspective. But Maya Rodriguez was different. She didn't just think outside the box. She seemed unaware that a box existed at all. In the private chambers of the academic council, heated discussions erupted. Some argued for immediate termination of the exchange program. Others, fewer but growing in number, saw something remarkable taking shape. "She is unpredictable," Vornke noted during a closed session, "and that makes her dangerous." Little did they know how prophetic those words would become. Maya Rodriguez was about to challenge everything they believed about knowledge, learning, and the very nature of intellectual progress. The first day of her arrival was just the beginning. Acaleidemia was about to experience a transformation it could never have anticipated, challenging established norms. The second lunar cycle of Maya Rodriguez's presence at Acaleidemia brought with it a growing sense of unease among the institution's most senior academics. What had begun as curiosity was rapidly transforming into something more complex, a subtle but persistent disruption of centuries-old methodological practices. In the Adaptive Theoretical Systems Lab, Maya's approach to problem-solving continued to baffle and challenge her instructors. Where previous exchange students had meticulously followed prescribed analytical frameworks, Maya introduced what the aliens could only describe as creative chaos. Professor Lyra Anks watched through observation fields as Maya worked on a particularly complex quantum entanglement simulation. Traditional approaches would involve hours of careful mathematical modeling, precise computational parsing, and incremental adjustments. Maya, however, approached the task like a child solving a puzzle. Intuitive, seemingly random, yet undeniably effective. "You're looking at it wrong," Maya had said during her first major project presentation, her finger tracing alternative pathways on the holographic display that seemed to defy the established theoretical models. "These constraints aren't limitations, they're opportunities." The academic council found themselves in an unprecedented situation. Maya's methods couldn't be easily categorized or dismissed. Her solutions were unorthodox, yet they consistently produced results that challenged existing theoretical frameworks. During an advanced xenobiology seminar, she proposed a completely new approach to understanding interspecies genetic adaptation. Where previous research had been constrained by rigid computational models, Maya suggested a more dynamic, almost organic method of analysis. Her proposal wasn't just a theoretical exercise. It was a fundamental reimagining of how biological information could be understood and processed. "Humans are generalists," she explained to a room of skeptical alien academics. "We survive by adapting, by seeing connections where others see boundaries. Our strength isn't in perfection. It's in our ability to reimagine what's possible." Zara Cole, the senior xenobiological researcher, found her neural pathways both frustrated and intrigued. The human's approach violated nearly every established research protocol. And yet, the preliminary data suggested something extraordinary, a potential breakthrough that had eluded generations of researchers. The resistance was immediate and multifaceted. Conservative faculty members argued that Maya's methods were dangerously unpredictable. They saw her approach as a threat to the carefully constructed intellectual ecosystem of Acaleidemia. Younger researchers, however, began to see something else, a potential revolution in academic thinking. Private communications began to circulate, whispers of a human who was challenging fundamental assumptions. Students began to request access to Maya's research logs, her project notes. Her method of thinking became a subject of study in itself. But Maya wasn't just challenging academic norms, she was reshaping them from within. Her interdisciplinary approach meant that traditional departmental boundaries began to blur. A problem in quantum mechanics might find its solution in a biological system. A theoretical challenge in computational science could be resolved through an approach borrowed from human social dynamics. During a critical project review, Maya introduced what would become known as the adaptive resonance method, an approach that allowed for more fluid, dynamic problem-solving. Traditional academic models relied on rigid, predetermined pathways. Her method suggested a more organic, responsive approach to knowledge creation. "Knowledge isn't a destination," she would often say. "It's a journey. And sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you're willing to get lost." The academic council found themselves at a crossroads. Maya Rodriguez represented something unprecedented, a challenge to their most fundamental beliefs about learning, knowledge, and intellectual progress. Some saw her as a threat. Others saw her as the first glimpse of a potentially revolutionary approach to understanding the universe. Vornke, the headmaster, watched the unfolding situation with a mixture of concern and reluctant admiration. The human was changing Acaleodynia, not through force, but through a quiet, persistent reimagining of what was possible. As the lunar cycle drew to a close, one thing became increasingly clear. Maya Rodriguez was not just an exchange student. She was the beginning of something much larger, a potential paradigm shift that would challenge the very foundations of academic understanding across the galaxy. The real transformation was just beginning. Breakthrough and resistance. The Galactic Convergence Project was Acaleodynia's most ambitious long-term research initiative, a complex multi-species endeavor aimed at understanding the fundamental interconnectedness of cosmic systems. For generations, the project had been trapped in theoretical gridlock, with each participating species contributing incremental data that never quite bridged the gaps between their understanding. Maya Rodriguez saw the project differently. Her proposal came during a critical review session that had been intended to be her final evaluation. The assembled academic council expected a standard presentation. What they received was nothing short of an intellectual revolution. "The problem isn't the data," Maya explained, her holographic presentation shifting in real time. "It's how we're looking at the data. We've been treating these cosmic systems like separate machines, but they're more like living organisms, interconnected, adaptive, responsive." Professor Zarakol's neural interfaces flickered with a mixture of irritation and intrigue. Maya's presentation defied every established research protocol. She wasn't just suggesting a new approach. She was dismantling decades of established scientific methodology. The Galactic Convergence Project had become a symbol of academic futility. Multiple species had contributed decades of research, yet the fundamental breakthrough remained elusive. Quantum entanglement models, gravitational wave analysis, interspecies computational frameworks, all had failed to provide a comprehensive understanding of cosmic interconnectivity. Maya's approach was radically different. Instead of treating the data as static information, she proposed a dynamic modeling system that could adapt in real time. Her methodology drew from unexpected sources: human evolutionary biology, emergent systems theory, even patterns of human social interaction. It was an approach that seemed almost heretical to the established academic minds of Acaleodynia. "We're not just collecting data," she argued. "We're creating a living map of cosmic relationships." The resistance was immediate and fierce. Senior researchers argued that her approach was too unpredictable, too unstructured. Her methods violated every established research protocol. Yet, as they challenged her, something extraordinary began to happen. Preliminary simulations using Maya's adaptive framework started producing results that defied previous limitations. Complex quantum interactions that had remained unexplained for centuries began to show patterns. Gravitational anomalies that had puzzled researchers for generations suddenly made sense. Vornke watched the unfolding scenario with growing complexity of emotion. The human was doing something unprecedented, not just challenging the system, but fundamentally reimagining it. The academic politics became increasingly complex. A faction of younger researchers began to rally around Maya's approach. They saw in her method a potential escape from the rigid, increasingly ineffective research methodologies that had dominated Acaleodynia for generations. But not everyone was convinced. A powerful conservative faction, led by senior researcher Clurin, began a systematic attempt to discredit Maya's work. They argued that her approach was dangerously unscientific, that it introduced too many variables, that it threatened the very foundation of academic research. Maya found herself fighting on multiple fronts. Her research was subjected to unprecedented scrutiny. Every calculation, every hypothesis was challenged. Where other researchers might have buckled under the pressure, she seemed to thrive. "Criticism is just another form of data," she would often say, her eyes sparkling with a combination of determination and intellectual excitement. The turning point came during a critical presentation of the Galactic Convergence Project. Maya's team had been working around the standard research cycles, pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible. When she presented her findings, the academic hall fell into a stunned silence. Her adaptive framework had done what generations of researchers had failed to achieve. It had created a comprehensive model that showed the intricate, living connections between cosmic systems. More than just a theoretical model, it provided predictive capabilities that seemed almost impossible. Zara Kull, who had been one of her harshest critics, found her long-established neural pathways struggling to process the implications. This wasn't just a breakthrough, it was a complete reimagining of scientific understanding. As the presentation concluded, the academic council found themselves facing a fundamental question. The human exchange student had done more than challenge their research methodologies. She had demonstrated an approach to knowledge that was simultaneously more intuitive and more rigorous than anything they had previously conceived. Maya Rodriguez was changing Acaleodynia, and the galaxy was about to take notice. The breakthrough was just the beginning. The real transformation was yet to come. Transformation and conflict. The aftermath of Maya's breakthrough in the Galactic Convergence Project sent shockwaves through the intricate political landscape of Acaleodynia. What had begun as an academic challenge had transformed into a full-scale institutional crisis. Clurin, the most prominent conservative researcher, initiated a formal challenge to Maya's research methodology. The proceeding would be the most comprehensive academic review in the institution's history, a process designed to either validate or completely discredit her work. Maya understood the stakes. This wasn't just about her research. It was about challenging fundamental assumptions about knowledge, learning, and intellectual progress. Her preparation was unlike anything Acaleodynia had ever witnessed. Where traditional researchers would compile exhaustive technical documentation, Maya created a living, adaptive presentation that could respond to challenges in real time. Her research wasn't a static collection of data, it was an evolving ecosystem of knowledge. The review board consisted of the most senior researchers from 12 different galactic species. Each brought their own deeply entrenched methodological frameworks, each expecting to find fundamental flaws in Maya's approach. What they discovered instead was something entirely unexpected. Maya's adaptive research framework wasn't just a theoretical construct. It was a revolutionary approach to understanding complex systems. Her methodology demonstrated an ability to process information that transcended traditional computational limits. She had essentially created a new language of scientific inquiry, one that was more fluid, more responsive, more alive. Science isn't about proving what we know, Maya argued during her presentation. It's about creating pathways to what we don't yet understand. The political maneuvering intensified. Clurin and his conservative faction saw Maya as an existential threat to their established power structures. Her approach challenged not just scientific methodologies, but the very hierarchical systems that had defined academic progress for generations. Younger researchers and more progressive faculty members began to rally around Maya. They saw in her work a potential liberation from the increasingly rigid and ineffective research paradigms that had dominated Acaleodynia for centuries. But Maya was fighting a battle on multiple fronts. The personal cost was significant. She faced isolation, constant scrutiny, and a systematic attempt to undermine her credibility. Where other researchers might have retreated, she pushed forward with a determination that was uniquely human. Her background became a subject of intense study. How could a researcher from a species considered technologically immature produce such groundbreaking work? Investigations into her personal history revealed something remarkable. A childhood characterized by constant adaptation, creative problem-solving, and an inherent ability to see connections where others saw barriers. The Interstellar Academic Consortium began to take notice. Maya's work was no longer just an academic curiosity. It was a potential paradigm shift in scientific understanding. During a critical closed-session review, Vornke made a decision that would change everything. Instead of attempting to contain or discredit Maya's work, he proposed something radical, a complete restructuring of Acaleodynia's research methodologies. "We are facing a moment of fundamental transformation," he told the assembled council. "The human has shown us that our greatest limitation has been our own inability to imagine beyond our established frameworks." The personal toll on Maya was significant. The constant political battles, the systematic challenges to her work, the isolation, it was a pressure cooker of intellectual and emotional stress. Yet she remained focused, driven by a combination of curiosity and an almost inexplicable belief in the power of human adaptability. Her supporters grew, not just among the researchers, but among students who saw in her a different approach to knowledge. They weren't just learning, they were reimagining what learning could be. As the lunar cycles passed, it became increasingly clear that Maya Rodriguez was more than just an exchange student. She was a catalyst, a living demonstration of humanity's potential to challenge, to adapt, to transform. The final confrontation was approaching. Academia would never be the same again. The real revolution was just beginning to take shape. Paradigm shift. The final lunar cycle of Maya Rodriguez's exchange program would be remembered as the moment that changed academic understanding across the galaxy forever. The Comprehensive Adaptive Systems Symposium was more than a conference. It was a crucible of intellectual transformation. Researchers from over 217 different species gathered, their attention focused on a single presenter, the human who had become both a legend and a controversy. Maya's presentation was unlike anything they had ever experienced. It wasn't just a collection of data or a theoretical framework. It was a living, breathing demonstration of a completely new approach to knowledge. Her adaptive research methodology had evolved beyond even her original concepts. What had begun as a theoretical approach had transformed into a dynamic system of understanding that could reshape itself in real time. It was intelligence itself, reimagined. "We've been approaching knowledge as a destination," Maya explained, her holographic presentation shifting and adapting with each word. "But knowledge is a journey. It's alive. It breathes. It changes." The conservative faction, led by Clarin, made their final stand. They brought every argument, every piece of contradictory data, every potential flaw they could identify. What they didn't realize was that Maya's methodology had already anticipated their challenges. As each critique was raised, the presentation adapted. It wasn't defensive, it was responsive. Each challenge became an opportunity for deeper understanding. The very act of challenging the research became part of the research itself. Vornko watched from the sidelines, understanding that he was witnessing something historic. The human had done more than introduce a new research method. She had fundamentally reimagined the nature of intellectual pursuit. The symposium became a turning point. Researchers from species that had never collaborated before found themselves drawn into conversation. Maya's approach transcended traditional academic boundaries. It wasn't about competition. It was about collective understanding. Her final demonstration was nothing short of revolutionary. Using her adaptive framework, she mapped connections between seemingly unrelated scientific disciplines that had previously been considered impossible to integrate. Quantum mechanics merged with biological systems. Cosmic theory intertwined with social dynamics. The boundaries between disciplines dissolved. But the true impact went beyond academic achievement. Maya had demonstrated something fundamental about human potential. It wasn't about technological sophistication or raw computational power. It was about adaptability, about seeing connections, about approaching challenges with a combination of creativity and relentless curiosity. The Interstellar Academic Consortium made an unprecedented decision. Maya's methodology would become the foundation for a new approach to academic research. Academia would be restructured, its rigid departmental systems replaced with a more fluid, adaptive framework. In the final moments of her presentation, Maya revealed the true depth of her approach. It wasn't just a scientific methodology. It was a philosophy of understanding. "Knowledge isn't something we collect," she said, her voice resonating through the massive hall. "It's something we create, together, always changing, always growing." The standing ovation was unprecedented. Researchers from species that had never before shown emotion in public found themselves moved beyond their traditional constraints. Clyrin, the most vocal opponent, approached Maya after the presentation. The look in his eyes was no longer one of opposition, but of genuine respect. "You've changed everything," he said simply. Maya's smile was both humble and knowing. "We've changed everything," she corrected him. As she prepared to return to Earth, Acaleidemia was no longer the same institution. The rigid structures that had defined academic pursuit for millennia had been transformed. A new approach to knowledge had been born, one that embraced change, celebrated diversity, and understood that true understanding is never static. The human exchange student had done more than complete her academic program. She had reimagined what it meant to learn, to grow, to understand. The galaxy would never be the same again.